So we're talking about creating and embedding a digital strategy. John and I had discussions about this when I was like saying, who wants to know about digital strategies now? We've been talking about these for 7 years. And John said, well, just recently I've had an influx of people asking me about writing a digital strategy. And I was like, okay, so it's still a thing. John went, oh yes, it's very much still a thing. So hence why we're here to talk about it this morning. We have Brani, Tariq and Jamie. I'll let themselves introduce themselves in a second. All three of you are involved with the digital strategies at different parts, at different stages in different ways. So hence that's why they're here, is to give you an idea of how you can do it, different ways it can be embedded or talked about, and also the different stages and the different roles that people have who are perhaps leading on digital strategy or when they're involved in it. So that's why we've got our panel of experts here this morning. So I'm going to ask you just first off, Brani, start with you. What's your name? What's your organisation? And just tell us a little bit about your involvement of digital strategies.
So Brani Milosevic. So I'm Serbian, but I've been living in London for about 25 years. And I've been working in so-called digital space since 2000, and specifically digital for non-profits. So I've worked as a head of digital at Save the Children UK, CAFOD, World Animal Protection. And then in 2015, I went into consultancy. So I ran my own consultancy called Digital Leadership. And the focus was then digital strategy mostly, but now I'm more on the transformation side. So all the changes that are happening to organizations because of the changes triggered by digital in the market that we operate in. So my involvement in digital strategies is clients ask me to help them with it, to write it for them, with them, rather. So I have many thoughts in summary. And also just to say, digital leadership is my consultancy. I'm also a part of the collective called Charity Change Collective, which Julie and Ross are here from the collective as well. And I have a partnership with the US nonprofit guys called Trout.
Thank you very much. Can I ask you to hand it over to Tariq?
Yeah. Hi, my name's Tariq Ali. I work with the One Parent Family Scotland. I'm the digital and IT services lead there. I've been in the voluntary sector, social enterprise sector for about 20 years in Scotland, working with various charities, both national and local charities, and quite varied roles, and not all of them directly related to IT or digital, but because I've got an interest and knowledge of digital and IT, I somehow become the IT guy that everyone goes to. So now I'm at One Parent Family Scotland, and I'm leading the digital transformation change there, and also dealing with cybersecurity as well. So yeah, excited to be here. Yeah,
thank you very much. And Jamie.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name's Jamie Trout. I'm the head of digital at Simon Community Scotland. We're a homelessness organisation. I've been working in digital for about 15 years. We set up the Get Digital Scotland programme, which is a digital inclusion programme for Scotland's homelessness sector. And we have been, I think probably for about 6 months earlier this year, we developed our digital strategy, which launched on the 1st of July. And we're now just moving into the execution of that. So, excited to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much. So again, it's all, just check my mic. So it's this idea that people are at different stages and different ways of being involved, and the different ways that you can actually get round to writing a digital strategy effectively. So all those different levels. So I think my first question really is, when we're talking about a digital strategy, what is it? What is a digital strategy? What does it mean to you within the work that you do? And I'm going to start off. Jamie, I'll ask you that first, and then Tariq, and then we'll come round to Brani, if that's okay.
For us, we don't really have a complicated definition of it. For us, it's just a structured plan of how the organization can best use digital tools and technology to meet its objectives, whether that be from the organizational strategy, which is a separate document to our digital strategy, or whether that's the objectives that come from that. So it's basically we look to set out a list of digital initiatives that we want to achieve and prioritize those initiatives and set out a roadmap so that we can communicate kind of what's happening, what's coming next, and what we want to achieve throughout the lifetime of the strategy. Our lifetime is 2 years. I don't know if we're getting into timing at any point, but that's what strategy means to us.
Cool. Thank you. I think we've kind of like done things slightly differently to yourselves. We've got the digital strategy, which is kind of like wrapped up in our comms strategy as well. So, but now after like talking to you as well, I think we'll go back and maybe just like separate that out. We make reference to the digital strategy and the organizational strategy. But again, I think we could do more with our strategy at the moment, and maybe could do with like a refresh in terms of like inclusion of like artificial intelligence and how we use that as a charity for the benefit of our service users.
Right. So totally agree with the timeline. So this kind of 2 years thing. What I would add to everything that's already been said is when it comes to digital technology, there is nothing that cannot be done. We can do everything, whatever you think about, whether it's about in the area of recruitment or running shops or running services. There's like zillions of things to do. So what digital strategy can help with is provide focus. It can say, right, out of all these things, we have limited amounts of money. Out of all these things we could do, these are things we're going to focus on because it responds to our immediate organizational priorities. And I'm offering to give you the strategy structure that I use later on if it makes sense. I won't do it now.
I think I've got trouble with my microphone. Sorry, it's not. I'll use that one. Thank you. Thanks, Brani. Put that one too. Just move it around. We'll just move it around. So from that, there was a couple of things that both of you talked to there. You, both Brani and Jamie, you were saying 2 years. 2 years is key. My assumption is, because as John was saying earlier, tech can go out of date, things can change, and that can then push on what you want your objectives to be. So being able to give it a timeline of this is actually doable within our organizations, because if we're changing it constantly and constantly updating it, that's going to cost us a lot of money. And also people will just gain confidence in using one thing and then that's gone, and then they have to learn something. And as you were saying, Tariq, you said right at the start, you somehow ended up being the IT guy, as this just kind of happened upon you, and now you're the digital lead, and now you're kind of working with a digital strategy that's linked in with your comms. Which I know when we've chatted before, Tariq has said, after speaking to these two, I think I'm going to change where it is and do it. And I was like, well, you don't have to, because it doesn't have to be a separate document, right? It can be embedded in something else, right? It doesn't have to be a standalone. How has that led to the decisions that you've made, Jamie? So why is it standalone for you? How come it's there? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think it's contextual. I mean, it might be right for your organization to do it that way. For us, it was, we went with a standalone document. And I guess there's a few benefits to doing it either way, really. I don't think there's a right or a wrong. I think if you've got a standalone document, it can give like focus towards those digital initiatives, and it allows a certain degree of flexibility because you don't have the kind of the bureaucracy of having to go and change the whole organizational strategy as technology changes at a fairly fast pace. However, I think there's also a risk of digital strategies being misaligned with organizational strategy if they're different documents, so that does need to be managed. If it's embedded into an organizational strategy or a comms strategy, I think that actually gives it a little bit I think it helps to bring everybody along on that journey because it's front and center of those organizational strategies. So there are kind of pros and cons of each. We went with a standalone, and that kind of works well for us. But I think the key thing for us was the delivery of that strategy doesn't sit just within digital. Digital team is part of it, but there's a cross-functional working group that we created called the Digital Strategy Committee, which includes the Deputy CEO, the Finance Director, Heads of Service, Admin, Corporate Services, and the digital team. So you've got these kind of different perspectives and sort of knowledge from across the organization, as well as that digital expertise when you come to decision making.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you've taken quite a strategic approach to where it's at, what it's doing in the organisation and how it sits.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm very fortunate at Simon Community that the leadership is really invested in digital, and they've really prioritised it and made it put a lot of resources towards creating and delivering the digital strategy. I've also worked for organisations where leadership have not been involved in digital, and that can be a real challenge. So that my number one tip would be get leadership on board early if you're looking at doing digital strategy. I think it'll be a really, really important ally for the project.
That's going to be one of my later questions is, but how, Jamie, how? But we'll come to that in a second. Keep people in suspense with that one. So Tariq, for you, how did it happen for your organisation at this? Did it just happen? Was there a bit more of a strategy around it, or it's part of comms?
Yeah, I think it was kind of due to like the structure of our like team. So we're like our comms and digital team were kind of like we're kind of like merged into one. So it just made sense for us to have like everything in that one document, just for ease of like clarity and stuff across the board. But yeah, I think we need to maybe like you're saying, like reflect more on it, make it more strategic, make it more kind of like time limited. Maybe have like some like top level type things that we can meet quite easily in terms of like meeting our like cybersecurity needs, whatnot. Use of like digital tools, maybe like rollout of different digital. Like just now looking at rolling out a new telephone system, for example. So that could be in there as well. But yeah, so that's how it kind of came about.
Yeah. Thank you. And I was going to say, because you've started to touch on challenges. So Brani, this is my kind of question to you. I know there could be loads of challenges.
Probably like the biggest challenge is like the F word, funding.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I had said that, people would have been worried where I was going to go with that, Tariq, to be honest. So it's good that it came from you. Yeah, so Brani, we'll start with that one, because I think for when you are, so people kind of, for me, would bring you in when they're stuck or at the start or at any stage of writing a digital strategy. So for thinking about that for you, what are there common themes that you see with folk that when you come into an organisation and you go, oh, I've seen this so many times before, or this is new? What are kind of the key things that you see where you think, right, well, this is how you've got here and this is what you need to do next? What are there those kind of typical sticking blocks that come across for you?
So I'll right. One thing about digital that you always used to say is digital shines the brightest light on all the dysfunctionality of an organization. And this is a very complicated thing when you're sitting as a digital manager or lowest level in the hierarchy and you're exposing all these dysfunctionalities to the organization. So it's a really hard position to be in, which is where I come in as a consultant to kind of, it's much easier for me to communicate this to the organization. But that's the biggest challenge, because you're brought in to sort out a thing, but the reason why a thing, for example, CRM implementation or website does not work is not because the technology doesn't work. It's because there is no alignment about what it's meant to be doing, which is going back to that focus. So, for example, a recent client saying, the website's rubbish, it's horrible, it doesn't work for us. Right, what's the evidence? What are you telling me? What is not working? And then everything I'm hearing is nothing to do with the website. It's to actually do with how they are planning. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of one point. It's a difficult position of, how digital kind of exposes all these things. Typical problems, planning. So who shouts the loudest gets the thing done. That's kind of typical. Siloed planning, siloed working. Everyone bibs away in their own silo. While there is only one website, there is only like 2 or 3 email lists. There's like one database of people. So you can't just beaver away because it has impact on all these things. So that is kind of, I suppose those are the two that I would highlight.
Yeah. So that idea about people working, because I think that links to what Jamie was saying about actually sitting across the organisation. And you've also mentioned that, Tariq, as well, about looking at what are the objectives. So there, if you've got it for 2 years, it then gives you that opportunity to go back and go, right, well, is it just one department that's done it? Is this worked across all of the organisation? And you're able to have a benchmark, I suppose, because you have to start somewhere, right? So
you're touching this on a very interesting point, which John said is going to be touched on before. So it's, who are you doing this for? Are you doing this for happiness of your colleagues? Are you doing this because someone out there who you're in service of needs it? Mm-hmm. And there are sometimes, if you're implementing internal payroll or whatever, like how you sign off annual leave, those kind of systems, then your internal client is your staff. So you need to be user focused and think about what is the easiest way for staff to do this and not spend hours doing it. Yeah. So it's kind of bish bash bosh type of problem. But when it comes to external communications like fundraising and comms, it's not about keeping marketing team happy or fundraising team happy. It's about what is our audience out there expecting from us, needing from us, and how we're going to deliver best to them, because then we'll engage them, which means that whatever their role in our organization is, we're going to achieve that goal. So I think that's the main thing. It's about always being user-centric wherever the users are, whether they're external or internal.
So that's more about not just simply having a digital strategy for the digital strategy's sake, but understanding it does have a purpose and who your immediate users are. So if it is internal, what's the objectives for that? If it is external, who is that? So keeping that constant eye on who's it for, what's its purpose, and then aligning that as something that Ross always talks about in the senior leader program is actually what's your organizational purpose, and then what's your internal, and how is that mirrored, how is that aligning, because sometimes we can forget that actually as an organization we're supposed to do this, so therefore our values should therefore reflect what we're doing, and that should show within our strategy.
So to put in that context, so the reason why we're doing CRM is like, our CRM is like our database is dying. So there is obviously that point of like, we just need to replace. Yeah. But why are we needing it is the main thing. So it's not like a tail wagging the dog type of situation. That's what you're looking for. It is about engagement, or it could be service delivery, or, efficiency, whatever is is where you feel this area is going to bring the value to the organizational strategy.
Thank you. I'm going to pass back to, I'm actually going to ask Tariq, go back to your F word. For you, what was that? What does that encompass for you or bring to mind when you're saying that? So that clearly is for you is a challenge. So give us a bit more context around that for you.
Yeah, I think it can be a challenge for many charities as well. So whereas some people may think of a spend on like digital being less valuable than, let's say, like spending on like crisis support for our service users, which, so there's always going to be like a tension there. But if we were to look at spend on digital for like a purpose, like you're saying, like not just spending for change's like sake, as long as there's a purpose there, you're always looking at your internal customers or external customers, service users, then that money should be seen as being an investment rather than, just like an unneeded expense. I think so. So always like focusing on like internal customers for try to keep them happy, streamline business processes. I'm like constantly like thinking of how we can like streamline business processes, make life easier for colleagues so they can spend more time supporting, the single parents that we're all there to support.
So kind of using digital to increase their capacity and having that in the strategy to say, this is why we're doing this, so that you can therefore do more of that frontline work.
Absolutely. And then if we can also just like capture, there's like a lot of like hidden data like at the moment. So if we can have more like data on hand that we can show that there's like an unmet need, that'll give us like a stronger case like for more funding to help support more single parents in say like rural areas.
So that wider funding picture. I'm going to ask you if you can hand that to Jamie, just to go back to your, Jamie, we're talking about leadership and I'd said, but how do you get the buy-in? So you've written your strategy. It's amazing. Brani's come in. She's changed the lives of everybody. Everything is wonderful. How do you get it from, of course, Brani, of course. How do you get it from being sitting on the shelf to being a working, living, breathing thing? Do you have to do that before you write the strategy, or do you, Jamie, just sit there and go, today I will write a strategy. Here you go, everybody. What happens?
I don't think I have an answer for exactly how that happens. I think it's there's a lot of different things that go on in order to get a document from being something that's written on a page to in action. But I think getting that leadership on board early is really important. And I think you can do that by kind of demonstrating how digital can actually help the organization to meet its objectives as well. So it's that alignment piece between what digital brings and the organizational vision, strategy, goals, objectives. The other thing, I guess, is around, I think it's really important to, if you're looking to try and get people on board, it's the idea of starting with quick wins. Start small, like look for a project where you can deliver results with low risk, low costs. There'll be something in your organization that you can just find a digital solution that's fairly cheap that'll make people's lives easier. And when you can evidence that, suddenly you'll start to build confidence for further change down the line. So I definitely recommend starting with some of the smaller things. I guess also it's ensuring that digital strategy committee that we have at Simon Community, ensuring that is the role of the people on that committee is to feed that back to their teams as well. So it's not just something that sits in a management meeting. It's that's on an agenda item on every meeting throughout the organization, and that the roadmap is visible. It's up on the wall so people can see what's coming next, and it's talked about and discussed and reasoned, with the teams.
So that would help, as Brani was saying, with that siloed, people working in silos and digital shining a dysfunctional light, or a light on the dysfunction, not the light's dysfunctional. But that idea, and if you've got a team that's working on it and they're filtering it down, and you're also picking out something, I think Tariq, you'd mentioned this idea of that kind of hidden data. So if you can pick something that is quick for somebody, so it might be their HR system. John and I have always talked about that for about the last 7 to 10 years, about it's the HR function that does seem to upset people the most, because all I want to do is book my holiday and I have to ask 6 different people and get 5 different files out. Why can't I just press a button? So if you can give somebody internally that quick win, they then see, okay, this works really well for me, so they can then start to transfer that to the people that they're working with. And that then for them goes, right, that's how we do it. So there is a kind of a culture piece that has to happen. Would that be first, beforehand, as you're going along? Does it ever stop? What happens there to get that, to keep that momentum going, I guess?
Yeah, I don't think it stops. I think, obviously the earlier you can kind of get people on board with the direction, the digital transformation kind of journey that you're on, the better. And the more kind of quick wins that you can have, like, if you get the HR system sorted and HR have suddenly got a bit more time and everybody can see their pay slip and book their holiday, and the exec team can see like what the latest sickness trends are across the organization. Like, that's one system, but you might have solved like 5 or 6 problems across the organization. I think that kind of gives people confidence for the next thing as well. So, one of the things as well we looked at, we did a couple of systems for HR. One was a recruitment system, like a applicant tracking system to get people in. And right in the middle of it, the manager of HR left the organization, and it was like, okay. So that was kind of a real challenge for us. But then we kind of got through that by, where's Ronan? Ronan he's our audio visual digital guy. He created loads of videos for us on how to use that. So then the next time we actually came around to doing the HR system, we actually built that in as part of the project plan, so that if there is any sort of change in personnel, we're ready to go for it.
So it doesn't leave with them, so it's there.
Yes, exactly. So we've got these video guides now on how to use the system, which has been great, so that if somebody leaves now, there's a ready-made solution kind of there. So I guess it's kind of like taking that learning and then like communicating that you kind of you're learning from previous errors and challenges, and then you're sort of continuously improving the way that you deliver these digital projects as well.
Thank you. Brani, I'm going to ask you a question around when you're going into an organisation and you're helping with that. We've had brief chats about this before around leadership, and I think one of the things that you'd said was that confidence can be a real issue. So tell me a bit more about that, thinking about leaders and confidence.
So I suppose what happens is that I suppose there is this kind of scared to show that you don't know. And then you're reliant on a kind of junior digital person to tell you. And then because they're junior, you don't really listen to them, and then you just go off and make a decision. and I find it really staggering that these things happen, because it's a very similar situation like with fundraising. It's like you have a director of senior fundraising person who tells you X, Y, and Z, and your whole budget is kind of, and you just listen to them and say, yeah, fine. But with digital, this somehow doesn't happen. So there is because I think people believe that they need to understand the detail. Now, digital is complicated from the point of view that you kind of need to understand the principles in order to be able to make decisions.
Right.
That is true. But you don't need to know the details. So you don't need to understand how Facebook advertising works in order to make decisions about Facebook advertising. But you need to understand roughly that there's kind of optimization piece, and that there is a lot, it's content hungry. Like, you need to understand the basics around it. So we in the collective are actually, this is one of our focus about how do we help leaders build confidence around this so that they can make better decisions. Because the issue, like with Jamie's giving a perfect example, is like, if you don't have leadership on board, you will get stuck eventually, and you will get stuck on kind of either on funding or basically the project is going to be seen as too much of a risk and just like parked and that kind of thing. So the other thing that I kind of really want to communicate today to everyone, because I think it's useful for the strategy and to everything. I'm going to do the drawing. Can I do my drawing now?
Yeah, go to your drawing.
Right.
Go on.
So the one thing that I really want everyone to take away, and I think this is what we're trying to communicate to leaders as well, is when it comes to digital, it's not just about the tech. So, and when I say tech, I mean systems and data and technology, but it is also about people, and it is about the process. And the reason why this thing is complicated, because the transformation bit is this. That's where it happens. So when you think about, we're going to change our CRM, you can't just think about we're going to change our CRM. You need to think about, do we have people with the right skills? And if we don't, how are we going to train them up? So to your point, you've done the videos. So it's kind of, you constantly have to think about all three things. Process. I implemented CRM, Salesforce CRM a very long time ago in an organization. I made loads of mistakes, which I can tell you about around these things. But, the process we built that kind of was more efficient, but the finance team came back and said, no, you changed our process. We can't possibly change the process. It has to stay like this. So we had to break the automated process in 4 places to make it more convoluted and non-automated. But this is exactly because there was not that maturity of thinking to say, well, hang on, this thing is making us more efficient. Therefore, we should probably make the changes. But if we were to make changes, it will impact other people and other teams, which is why it's complicated. So if there is one thing to bear in mind on making doing the strategy or doing the change, or kind of, that's what we want leadership to understand. If you're investing in this, you need to invest in this as well. Yeah. This is the discussion Tariq and I had. It's like leadership is investing in tech, but are they investing in more of you, Tariq?
Yeah.
And then they need to also invest in process, and I accepting that the process may need to change.
Yeah.
So that's my, you will see this throughout the day.
Thank you, Brani. Again, it does really speak to that fact that we were talking about. It is this idea that when you're putting that strategy, there has to be a vision, there has to be a purpose, and there has to be that user focused on what's the impact to the people. Otherwise, it is just a dead document that sits on somebody's desk. It might look beautiful. You might have spent a lot of money making it look very pretty, but if it doesn't actually do something, it doesn't really matter. And I've got two more questions just to ask you before we open it up. But my next question is around language, about the importance of language, thinking about that people aspect of it. So Tariq, for you, that starting off with that one, can we just say whatever we want in whatever kind of tech speak that we need, or does it have to be?
I think, yeah, as with everything, it has to try and make it as accessible as possible, and understand if it's like a big organization, you're going to have people that are maybe not as digitally advanced as like the rest of us. So just, try to make it as accessible as possible, make it as easy to read as possible, make it exciting as well.
Exciting? Tariq, that's a big ass digital strategy. I'm sure yours is amazing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Very exciting.
And Jamie, that again for you as well, presumably that's a key thing.
Totally, a digital strategy is not for tech people, it's for everybody in the organization. So everybody should be able to pick it up and get a grasp of exactly what direction you're going in that digital landscape. But there's also, there is a place for technical language as well in action planning and implementation documents. But I think the strategy is better off being like really high level, really simple language, no jargon. And it's about bringing people on a journey with you.
Yep. And Brani, you're basically nodding, going, yes.
Well, I suppose I just want to, I'm talking too much. I just want to add that to your point, I think thinking about digital not as technology, but thinking about digital as culture, because the reason why it's transformative is because the world around us has changed because technology has changed. But it's not just about technology. That's the whole point. It is about we need to respond to cultural changes. Everyone's on the phones. People are just used to this way of operating, and we as non-profits need to respond to this.
Yep. And my kind of final question, now, when we did a kind of a bit of a get together just to rehearse and practice some of the questions to make sure we were hitting all the right notes. And I asked this question, and I could see Tariq and Jamie break out in a cold sweat when I asked this one. So this one was around, you've got your digital strategy, you've got your buy-in, it's all there, it's all singing and all dancing. And then your chief exec announces that they're moving on to a different job. And then you get a new chief exec where digital is not their priority, and they want you to get out and stop messing about with computers and go on and do some frontline work. How does that make you feel? What happens? Tariq, what happens for you?
I can feel my blood pressure rising already, thinking about the prospect.
Jamie's just wiped sweat off his forehead.
Yeah, but I think I'd be pretty confident in having pretty strong arguments against cutting back of services or whatnot in terms of digital, just emphasize the positives and the potential benefits. Not just for us internally as well, but just also for our service users ultimately. So where we're talking about digital and digital transformation things, and we try to even within our policy, digital policy, we were trying to emphasize that not all of our service users have smartphones yet. They're not able to access data on the go and stuff. So just trying to also think about them as well, and then bring them on the journey with us as well.
Yep, thank you, Jamie.
Yeah, if suddenly I could only empathise if that was something that people face, and I'm sure they do. But suddenly you've got a digital strategy and you're going in one direction, and then there's a change of leadership, and it's no longer a priority. I mean, I guess it's starting again. It's trying to explain the benefits that digital can bring and why, and going to those quick wins, using data to evidence your decisions, showing how it aligns to organizational strategy and the objectives there. Or you could go to Good Moves and find yourself another role.
run like the wind. And Brani, I was thinking for you as that consultant, I guess you come in and you're mid working with an organisation and that happens. What does that, because presumably there could be demotivation from staff that you're having to cope with. So if you've managed to build up staff and say, right, this is what's going to happen, what happens for you?
Well, actually, I am in that situation right now. So it's, well, first of all, what I wanted to say, send the CEO to the Action Learning Senior Program.
Our Senior Leader Program.
Because if there is a CEO who comes in and thinks that digital is not important, that in itself is
send them our way,
disappointing.
Sort them out.
Yes. But so the situation, I mean, which I suppose it is about you kind of have to recap. You have to, so it depends who the new person is, because it could be someone who is like, oh, all that is just like pedestrian. We need much more ambitious thing. Yeah. Let's bring in one of the big accountancy firms to just do the big transformation piece. And then it all kind of gets into this 3-year ongoing, very big process, which it's eventually something will happen.
It's very expensive, but it happens slowly.
Yeah. So I think there is more about, there's more stuff around that. There are, to be honest, sometimes the questions are good. Mm-hmm. Because when you're kind of beavering away in the process, you forget why you're doing, it's useful to kind of recap. Hang on, we actually did think about that. The reason why we're not doing it is X, Y, and Z. So is that prioritization piece? Because someone might say, and it's like, why are you focusing on that and not on this? And, you have to have an answer. So that is, but, as Jamie is saying, is like you kind of have to make the case again. But I really, really hope that you wouldn't get, I still believe that you probably hopefully wouldn't get a CEO although we did see it happening, like when everything crumbles down that's been built over 5 years. Yeah. So you're just going to need to live and hope and kind of keep going. Or not.
Or get yourself on the good moves. But it sounded like for the three of you, though, the key theme was just as long as you've got the data to say this is why we're doing it, this is what it's for, it's not just about computers, it is the people. So having those, as you put up in your diagram, those kind of 3 things linked in to be able to show this is what it's worth, this is what our digital strategy does, then that's your kind of start. My 50-year-old phrase would be your starter for 10, if people still use that anymore. I'm not sure if they do. But to be able to say this is our starting point, look at what we've done, and then you can back that up. There's a phrase that both me and Ross use, that if you don't, making decisions without data is just guessing. So that's where you would use that to be able to back up your strategy, I guess, is to having that in there. I'm going to stop there for my questions, but open that up to the audience. I think I've got one, or John's going to, yeah, would that be okay? John's going to roving mic you.
Sorry, I'm politely breaking the ice. Go forth. I'm Emma Whitelock. I'm the Chief Exec at Lead Scotland. Yeah, good point. Thinking about how you might convince a CEO it's a useful thing. Senior Leaders Programme, check. Also, if you can kind of contextualise it, why it's important for the strategy, why it's important for the people we support. I think you could sell it that way. And I was just thinking in practical terms, underneath our strategy, we use a planner, Microsoft Planner 365, and you put the actions in there and different people own different actions. So that way you maybe get shared ownership too. And by that way, keep feeding back to the senior team why it's important. You're sort of slightly embedding it. So these tools that you use for collaboration and communication, a sort of sneaky way, if you like, of getting people to own different things, and then you meet and review them. So I guess that's just a tactical tool. But if the people we support think it's good, then that should convince the CEO. Last point is, one of the challenges we have, I think, as you mentioned, Tariq, is sometimes you're supporting people who are not yet digital. So how do they then how do they then lead that change in the organisation if they can't yet be convinced? And I think if you work with some of those individuals to see the potential and use some of the quotes from there, we've got a lot of quotes from early users of tech saying, wow, I didn't know. And that also convinces board and senior leaders to think we need to support people to understand the potential. So that's another way in, even when you have people who are not yet digital, who need to be the ones to convince your organisation to be more digital. Anyway, I've broken the ice. Who's next?
Thank you, Emma. We've got two. Yourself here in the front and the black outfit. Thanks, John.
Hi, I'm Virginia Anderson. I'm Chief Executive Disability Snow Sport UK. Just to pick up on that point about kind of leadership and the strategy piece, I actually think it's a governance issue now. So I think it sits with the trustees. Forget the Chief Executive. I will take my we have to take our trustees with us. It's too important not to. I don't know Oscar's position on it, but certainly the Charity Commission is talking more and more about the need for example, charities to have a policy on the use of AI in the organisation. So I would take it above the chief exec's head and get it on that level, because that's how you sustain change, in my view.
So so taking it up. So actually it's all on the board level. I'm going to ask, sorry, so people can hear me. Do you have it on your board agendas for the two of you? Is that something that's there? Is that something you would suggest as well, Brani?
I'm also the board.
So yeah.
Too. It just depends. Like
Sorry.
the board I was on was very strongly influenced by the CEO. So my role was, but I do agree with you that I was, as a digital board member, I was approached by people in the organization where they had stuff to sell into the board for my support. And that's very clever, because that's kind of twice that I felt valuable as a board member, because I could actually champion something that people internally have put to the board, and I thought was a really good idea.
Yep, thank you. Tariq, what about yourselves? Is it on the board? Is it an agenda?
I'm not sure if it's an agenda item, but the board is definitely like aware of like the need of like making sure that we're up to speed with like cybersecurity and stuff. So there's a bit of like a top-down kind of like approach there as well, which is really beneficial. Actually, I think like to us as well. And I just created like a draft AI use of like AI like policy as well. So I know John's going to be talking about that later as well. So like getting board buy-in, I think is crucial. Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree. And it's a really good point. I think it is a governance issue. We've got, with our digital strategy committee, we've got 3 trustees that sit on that subcommittee, but they report back to the board every month as well. So it's kind of something I'm not sure it's an agenda item, but the issues that the organisation are facing in a digital context are put in front of the full board every month. So, yeah.
Okay, good night. Thank you. So it is something that, as you said, so it's not just sitting with the chief exec. And I think, Emma, your point about if people have got ownership on it, which I think, Brani, is what you said, as a trustee, you were given ownership to be able to have something that you were seeing was making a difference. And back to that thing with our little Venn diagram with people, involving people at every stage, at all levels, as you were saying, as long as it's the board, get your chief exec. Yep, that's the easy win, if you like, but it's the board is the next level. I'm going to do a plug for Ross's digital trustees as well, which is obviously out there, and that's something if you're looking for a trustee to kind of champion digital, then get in touch with Ross. He can do quite a lot with that. With Third Sector Lab, I've got their digital trustees out there as well. So there is that different level. So making sure everybody in the organisation at every level is involved in some way is the key to success. I'm going to say is the key. Would you say? I'm going to think.
I just wanted, because, Julie and I are very passionate about that point around people taking parts of the kind of the strategic approach and taking it away. So when her and I was supporting her when she was director of digital at Parkinson's UK, where we were trying to do the work with a learning and development team and HR team to really embed the kind of modern skills into the workforce. So that was, and Parkinson's is a very complicated organization with loads of volunteers as well as staff. So that was really interesting. But that was exactly our thing of like, the L&D people and HR need to take this away. This is not Julie's project. This is their thing.
Yep. Thank you. I'm going to, Ronan, you had your hand up. My final question. Let me go for it.
It's for Brani. On your diagram there, how do you convince people to change their processes, particularly if they're like older staff who've been at the organisation a lot longer than you?
I'm just going to repeat that in case you didn't hear that. So Ronan asked, so the people part in the processes, so how do you convince people to change their processes, particularly if they've been at the organisation for a long time? And my words would be they're wedded to that particular process.
You're
so
talking
Brani,
about me?
That was a subtle hint for Jamie. Start using Trello, Jamie. I think that was a subtle hint. Anyway, here.
Well, I'm not going to step into domestic here. So, I have 2 examples. So one, the person left, and everything was very much more easy. It's actually really amazing how one person can stand in the way of something that makes absolute sense. So, but it took 2 years, and everyone around realized that this needs to happen. So they left. But joking, as like a more constructive proposal is, I actually always suggest journeys for people who are using a thing. So what's the most typical journey the person's going to take, and these are the steps that they're going to take in order to book a tickets for an event, or to book a annual leave, or to whatever they're doing. And when you take it from that point of view, that's how you build the process, and then you adjust the process in the back end. And always accepting it's not going to be perfect, because it's people, and working with people is messy.
I was just going to say as well is that I think those people who do stand in the way, I think probably all experience them at different points in our careers. I actually find that if you can turn them, they can be the biggest allies as well. So I think sometimes is going and asking people for their input and their help really early, and trying to engage people as part of the solution. If you can get that to happen, they can be the biggest allies for digital change as well. Just a bit ironic, but it's true. Yeah.
So back to that idea that actually what's there, my words would be pain points, my kind of service design words would be taking them on that journey and actually finding out, well, what's the bits that are sore for you? Let's look at where digital can fix this and make this easier for you. And then that should hopefully get people inside. I'm just aware of the time, because I think we're about to go to a break. Thank you, Brani, Tariq and Jamie. It's been great and thoroughly interesting. Thank you very much.